So this is the first time I've tried an oil painting demonstration in a long time. So we'll see how it goes. I set up my lights a little different, so maybe it'll work. I'm painting on a piece of Bristol board that was primed with acrylic gesso and a 2-inch brush, and it has just a little bit of a texture to it, but you could do that any way you wanted. All right, so there's a lot of different ways to start painting. Some people just start right away with drawing the shapes, and honestly, sometimes that's what I do these days. But I'm going to show you the way I used to start my paintings. Always was a little more careful, more with an eye to a composition stage, instead of just sort of holding the idea in my mind and starting. Okay, so a lot of people do what's called an imprimatura, and what that is they pick a color that they're going to do their just use for their drawing, and then they put that color all over. This will not work for acrylics, so I'm just mixing a little water with cobalt blue, because the painting I'm doing is mostly blue. And I'm putting it on with a lot of thinner. I'm putting it on with a brush, but you can also just grab your paper towel or your rag and do it like that. You wear your brushes out less if you use a rag. Okay, and I've got my paper taped to my board, so I don't have to worry about drawing a little edge of where it's going to go under the frame, because the tape is serving as that little part that's going to go under the frame. All right, so now I'm ready to start my drawing, and what I'm doing is I'm not going to use any white yet. I'm just using the color, and I'm just kind of trying to see like where would these things go. And painting is about masses and shapes. Oh, it's so funny. I'm angled so much, just like the boat is angled while I'm sitting here. All right, so I think I got it all too big already. So let's just see. So yeah, my boats have got to be smaller. So then you can use your rag as an eraser. Kind of take that out again. And it's really funny. I really thought I had gotten my paper exactly the right proportion compared to my photograph, but I don't, and so it's really bugging me. So before I work on this more, I just have to re-crop it. I'm looking at these spaces in between everything, and I'm looking to see like how far does the boat come underneath the sail. So I'm kind of drawing, but also this is a compositional stage in my drawing. I'm just trying to get everything kind of placed. And I just realized it might really help me to have that background in there. it's just another marker for how far down is the sail, how far up. So I think I'm gonna have to make the boat smaller to be able to have them be tall enough. And I just realized I forgot my microphones, so this may all be for nothing. Shoot. And try to remember to change paper towels before you get paint all over yourself. And I'm not doing more stuff until I'm sure I've got these big shapes. So then this boat is way over here. And the reason I picked blue to use as a color to do the underpainting is because there's just so much blue. I could have used pink. That would have been maybe a better choice. I don't know. But one thing you can do with your underpainting or your imprimatura is you can look at the light and try to see how what kind of light effect, and make your imprimatura your first biggest statement about what kind of day it is. So if it's a really sunny day, maybe you'd use yellow. If it was a gray day, maybe you'd use violet. Yeah, you can basically just do pretty much whatever you want, except you don't want it to be too dark, because what happens with paint is over time it gets more transparent, and oh yeah, look how much lower the sail is. Okay. It gets more transparent, and if you paint on too dark a ground, that dark will start to show through over time and make your paintings darker than you wanted them to be. I don't know, a good example of that is Whistler. Some of his paintings are really dark that I'm not sure he meant to have be so dark, and that's because he painted on a very dark background, dark ground, or first coat was very dark. And that's why you can see paintings where you see things are coming through because they've been painted over, but that paint gets more transparent over time, and so then those things reappear like ghosts. So my thing is, I just can't think about everything at once, and I've always just wished I could just paint without drawing, just go ahead and start and not draw it, but and I've been kind of doing that, trying to do that lately, and I have nothing but regrets, because I feel like I've spent the whole painting trying to redraw and get everything more accurate, whereas if I had just done it to start with, a step like this. So I think it's time for me to go back to the basics. It's funny, I always do a really careful drawing in pastels because, you know, it's harder to cover up. You need to be a little more careful because you don't have forever on a pastel like you do on an oil painting. This could be the last oil painting I ever do. I could just work on it the rest of my life. Which is the good news and the bad news. It's one thing I like about pastels is that there comes a time when you're done. And this should start to be giving you an idea about how it's going to look as a painting, because painting is not about outlines, it's about masses. And so I'm really drawing here, I'm drawing in the masses, the big shapes. And I have picked a color that if I want to keep working now, well, I'm feeling so bad I don't have my microphones. So I know the sound isn't going to be very good. But I picked a color that would enable me to go ahead and work right over this, just to go ahead and transition sort of seamlessly from my drawing step into my into my painting, first lay-in of my painting. And the stripes on this boat, on this sail, I could I was hoping to get this other little boat in back here. Yeah, I should be able to, right? It's actually... So you're not supposed to use white when you're doing this under imprimatura, and I honest to God cannot remember why. But so I'm making my lights by rubbing things out, not by adding white to my blue. I guess just trying to keep it all really transparent. Not sure my sail is big enough yet. And the key thing about this sail is, yeah, it is white, but it's pretty much, most of it is darker than the sky. And of course, always remember that you want to draw enough that you don't feel confused when you start painting, but you also don't want to draw so much that you feel like you're just doing a paint by number. So sometimes it's hard to tell if you've drawn too much or enough until you start painting, and then you might find out. And the best time to redraw on a painting is right when you come back to it the next time you're coming to work on it, when your eye is fresh. And I usually just paint with this one paintbrush. It's a round bristle brush, and it was probably a size 8, maybe 6, depends on the brand. I've had it a really long time. And the thing I like about it, a round bristle brush, is you can do this, you can scumble with it, and you're not going to ruin it. If you treat a flat brush or a filbert or a bright, any kind of square brush, if you treat any kind of square brush like this, you're gonna wreck that brush. So, and I just can't count on myself to behave. I do use square or flat brushes, flats or filberts, later in paintings, and I have to really pay attention to not start scumbling and kind of wreck my brush. All right, well, let's just say that's, good enough drawing for now. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with the sky. Get some of that blue out of my brush. So I'm cleaning it just in water, and then I'm really wiping it off on my paper towel. So I'm going to grab some white and a little bit of the permanent rose and a little bit of cad yellow pale, and then I'm just going to start scumbling in the sky. I almost always start with the sky, especially obviously in landscape painting, because other kinds of paintings you might not have a sky. But it's the lightest thing in my painting, and it gives me a big kind of hint about what kind of day it is. You can hear that sound with my brush. I mean, that means I'm wearing out my brush a little bit. So, sometimes you might want to add more paint so you don't have such a sound of that wearing out your brush. But this is the beginning of the painting, and I want to keep my paint a little bit on the thin side because of that rule in painting of thick over thin and fat over lean. So I'm not using any medium in my paint. I'm thinning it with paint thinner, or with water in this case, because it's water-based oils. Now, I have not in recent years done that many oil paintings outdoors. I usually prefer to paint in pastel when I'm doing landscape, and save oils for indoors. And but I have done plenty of oil paintings outside. And the problem with oil painting outside is that you have to come back. It takes me more than one day to finish it. So you have to come back at the same time of day, and you have to have the same lighting situation to work on it again. And that's why, Monet had so many paintings of haystacks, because he came back to work on them and they didn't look like they looked when he started them, so he started new ones. So I could even hold my brush further back. That's why they give you these big long handles, so you can be far enough back that you can see the whole painting at a glance. So depending on how big your painting is, the further back you need to be, because you want to be able to see everything, not get up so close that you're just focused on one tiny part. Okay, so there's my sky, and I think what I'm going to do next is my white sail in shadow. I want to make sure it's darker than the sky, but I know it wasn't quite as dark as my drawing. The other thing I like about a round bristle brush is that you can come back and you can use it just like it was a flat brush to do a flat stroke. Now, I like a lot of paint on my paintings. I like them to look like they're painted. So I use quite a bit of paint, even in the beginning. I'm just using a tiny bit of water to make it flow a little better. And then there's a little bit of light on this sail that I want to get. Okay, golly. Okay, so will this sail, trouble. But I think what I'll do is I'll put in the white stripes. I could have drawn them better too. I just I did not, but I could have. And I want to be sure I get the way the stripes bend. They're not just straight. And I'm starting with a white first because that way the other colors won't, if I had started with my other darker colors, they could muck up the white first. In this way, the white's going to be down on there, and then the other colors I can add and not get my white dirty. Okay, and then the next one I'm going to use is the yellow because that's the next lightest of those colors. Some people don't even use white in this step. They try to avoid all white to keep the transparency or something. Like I say, I just can't remember because I don't really do it anymore. Okay, and then I got the blue. I think what I'm going to do first, though, is that I think I'm going to do the water. So for blues right now, I'm using cerulean. I have cerulean blue, I have turquoise, and I have cobalt, and I also have ultramarine blue. Yeah, so that was what I was wondering. So if this is the water, then maybe I don't really have the... So maybe I need to go back and make that a little darker. That sail. That's another reason to paint a little thinner at the beginning, is if you make mistakes, then it's easier to fix them. If your paint's not on too heavy. And remember, it's just your lay-in. I mean, it's not going to be perfect. And the only people that can do kind of a one-shot on the spot painting really are people that aren't, they're painting more of a formula. Whereas this, you know, I have to build up to the right color. I can't get it correct right away because I need to see it against the other colors to know whether it's right or not. Oh, I take it back. I mean, there was one guy who was incredible, Cerulia. He just did incredible paintings on the spot, and he used beautiful brush strokes. Most of the Impressionists used some sort of broken color, or like something that was more attuned to getting the right color than to getting just a brush stroke, whereas Cerulia was able to do a combo of the two, getting beautiful color and working in a brush stroke. Another thing I've been doing, which I didn't do here, but I have done before, is I start this with acrylics. And you can't do that kind of lay-in that I just did with acrylics very well. You can't just smear around and stuff because the paint will dry too fast. So, but sometimes it's kind of nice to start with acrylics because it cuts down on the number of days that you have to paint, because you can work longer the first day. I can work longer the first day before I get my painting all mucked up with too much paint on it. But for now, I'm just trying to get it all covered. And I never feel like I know what's going on until I get my whole painting covered anyway, so. I don't know, these little guys, I'm just going to put them in as dark shapes, space holders for the guys sailing their boats. So you know, I used to get in trouble for washing my brushes too vigorously in class. It's a bad habit that I have continued to have until this very day. You don't have to use such a big brush. You know, you could use a smaller brush, but okay, so that sail needs to be darker. And I'm telling that really by squinting and trying to see how the sail looks next to the water. Okay, and then I want to get in my land back there. So a big difference between oils and pastels is that in oils, you're mixing your colors. So like here, I wanted to have an orangey green. I mixed orange and green together. Whereas in pastels, I would have put down the orange and then put the green on top. And you do want to try to keep your horizon line straight. That's a little hard for me right now because I'm over here on the edge of the paper. And so I'll have to straighten things up probably later. Okay, so now I want to put in the blue sail, the blue stripes on the sail. So I've started with the big masses. I've kept everything in the big shapes. I would keep working on the big shapes until I got them as good as I could. And then the next thing I would do is start breaking it down and adding more shapes. But this first step with the paint is called a lay-in. And I like to do 2 lay-ins. So I like to come back another time and just stick with these big shapes, not try to make anything, not try to make smaller shapes, and try to get them better. So I try to work on getting the biggest shapes possible correct before moving on to smaller shapes. Yeah. And I'm not going to worry about the masks or anything. That's something I would do really at the end. So, let's see, is there anything else I can do? I'm going to lighten up this water in front and also under the boat. And you can see this is, I mean, I'm working a little fast because I'm filming, but this is why I have to have a lot of paintings going, because I get them mucked up and then I've got to, I can't really, you know, work on them because the colors don't, the colors muck together, unlike pastels where it's all dry. I really do love working on paper. For pastels, I mean for oils, I like to have a surface that is, let's see, what would be, I like a pretty smooth surface. I don't like a lot of weave of like texture of a canvas, because I just like to be able to build up paint texture right away, and it's easier to do that on a smoother surface. The thing about using the gesso underneath, you could build up a lot of texture to try to make it look like you'd worked on it longer, which is kind of a great trick. All right, so there's my first lay-in, and now I'm going to let that dry, and then I'll come back and do my second lay-in, hopefully with a microphone.